An eyewitness said it looked like the start of World War III. It was Mount St. Helens volcano in Washington state exploding with such force today that it was felt more than 100 miles away. At least 7 people were killed, several are missing, and some 2,000 evacuated. Gary Shepard has details.
Experts are calling it the most serious and most violent eruption since Mount St. Helens became active in late March after 123 years of dormancy. It began at 8:39 this morning with a tremendous explosion that sent hot steam and volcanic ash as much as 60,000 feet into the air. The eruption accompanied by at least 1 and perhaps 2 earthquakes, measuring 5 on the Richter scale. And since then, a nearly continuous series of earth tremors being felt as far away as Portland, Oregon, some 50 miles to the southwest. The eruption sent a huge wall of first mud, then rock and ash down one side of the mountain, causing incredible devastation to anything in its path. So far, no flow of lava.
The mud probably is, in some areas, is a quarter of a mile wide. It's just taken everything in the valley with it. And then we started noticing that the forest on every side was totally laying on the ground. Just miles and miles and miles of devastation. As I said, it looks like an atomic bomb just totally leveled the area.
The Tuttle River rose 20 to 30 feet as a result of debris pouring into it, and log flows tore out bridges in some areas. Interstate Highway 5, 30 miles west of the mountain, was closed for a time, and traffic was backed up for miles. A gigantic plume of gray ash now extends more than 300 miles to the east, as far as western Montana. This is how it looks on an infrared satellite photo. The city of Yakima, Washington, went into total darkness even before noon today as the plume reached there and continued to expand eastward. Airports were closed in many cities. People were told to remain indoors. Police had to wear masks for breathing. Several persons believed to be in the Mount St. Helens vicinity are unaccounted for, including Harry Truman, a longtime resident who only 9 days ago said he wouldn't leave no matter what. This latest eruption is now being studied closely by scientists who at this moment are not sure what is going to happen next. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Portland, Oregon.
As a vast volcanic cloud swept hundreds of miles east from Washington state's Mount St. Helens today, scientists speculated that it could slightly cool the world's temperature for a couple of years. The volcano was still perking after an awesome explosion of gas and ash that reshaped the landscape, slicing off the mountain's peak, wiping out Spirit Lake, a popular recreation area, in a wave of debris and steaming mud. By the way, that toll of 5 dead and 21 missing is as speculative as the future course of the volcano. Gary Shepard reports.
Mount St. Helens spewed forth more steam and volcanic ash again today, sending it as much as 14,000 feet into the air from a crater that is now half a mile wide. But scientists said today's activity was modest compared to yesterday's incredible eruption that caused 2 major earthquakes and sent smoke and ash some 10 miles into the atmosphere. This is what it looked like from space, as recorded by the U.S. weather satellite. The plume of volcanic ash has now been reported as far east as North Dakota, and one forecast is fallout could reach New England in 2 or 3 days. Many communities have been virtually paralyzed by the volcanic dust. Half an inch covers the ground in Spokane, Washington, 250 miles northeast of Mount St. Helens, up to 7 inches in other cities. Schools and businesses have been closed in hundreds of places, and residents have been ordered to remain indoors because of the danger from breathing in the dust. Army and Air Force helicopters flew into the area around the volcano during the day today and were able to rescue 8 survivors who had been trapped since yesterday. Many people, including longtime resident Harry Truman, who had refused to leave, are still unaccounted for. Bridges were swept away when gigantic mudslides came pouring out of the volcano. Trees were knocked over like matchsticks by a flow of mud that scientists said had the consistency of wet cement. So far, no lava has been detected. Dozens of homes were simply inundated by the mud. Many residents lost everything. 11 million young salmon were lost at this fish hatchery along the Green River, and the latest estimate is as many as 3,000 persons have been evacuated from the area. A team of geologists was flown to the base of Mount St. Helens today to implant electronic listening devices which they hope will give them some indication of what the volcano might do next. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Toutle, Washington.
Good evening. Mount St. Helens in Washington State emitted puffs of ash and smoke today as authorities warned of new dangers from a great wall of water. After the cataclysm of the weekend, the mountain seemed quiet, but it was the calm of a sleeping, still dangerous beast. There are 6 confirmed deaths now, and officials have raised the number of persons missing to 98. They also indicated there may be worse to come. Terry Drinkwater reports.
Up on Mount St. Helens, now shrouded in clouds, a dam created by volcanic rock and ash has millions of gallons of water, melted snow and ice from the hot mountain, backing up behind it. A new U.S. Geological survey calls the dam extremely unstable. At worst, the USGS warns a 200-foot wall of water could come racing down this canyon. A volcanic earthquake, there have already been many of them, could set it off. The medium-sized cities of Longview and Kelso, Washington, are downriver. Residents have been told to listen to their radios for an order that may come at any time: move to higher ground. Meanwhile, today, the first of the salvage efforts began. 5,000 acres of prime timber were burned or washed away by the disaster. Lumbermen called their losses staggering. So are those in commerce. Scores of freighters are stranded. The main ship channel to the Pacific is so clogged with mud, authorities estimate tonight it will take a year and $15 million to dredge it. And fish, the salmon and trout, cannot live in the water, silty and heated to 80 degrees by the volcano. In eastern Washington, where powdery gray ash is still falling, there is concern in the fields. Some wheat farmers suspect their crops are already ruined.
I'm sure it's going to affect yields and everything else, but just how much, I don't know. No idea.
Government officials say, however, the ash is less acidic than they expected and that the main damage will be to seedlings and to fruit trees. A good rain would help, none's forecast. Grazing land for horses and cattle is thick with ash, hay in short supply. For many in the Pacific Northwest, life has not been easy these past days.
Right now, it's kind of hard. Sleeping 4 in a Datsun, so right now I'm just building a bed for us and trying to exist.
In Spokane, the first city to be covered by the ash, the air is somewhat better today. Cleanup underway. The fallout literally stopped that city. Tomorrow, some semblance of normalcy is expected again. Meanwhile, the massive clouds continue to drift east, raising questions far beyond the volcanic Mount St. Helens. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Portland.
In Ritzville, Washington, that town's 10 patrol cars were put out of commission when ash clogged their air filters. From eastern Washington to western Nebraska, volcanic fallout fouled up life. Schools were closed in some communities, non-emergency traffic was curtailed, and the governors of Idaho and Montana declared emergencies. In Missoula, Gary Shepard explains why.
This city of 60,000, some 450 miles east of Mount St. Helens, remains under a state of emergency because of the volcanic ash fallout. Compared to some other places, Missoula received only a light dose of dust, 1/8 of an inch, but it was enough to close schools and all non-essential businesses. The speed limit on streets has been cut to 15 miles an hour to reduce airborne dust levels, and residents have been told to remain indoors because of the health danger from breathing it in. Air pollution levels here last night were measured at more than 19,000 micrograms of dust per cubic meter, compared to a normal level of 75 micrograms.
The thing we're most concerned about now is the long-term health effects of some of the high exposures we've had.
What are those possible health effects?
Diseases like silicosis, emphysema. We did have one lady who had to be taken off in an ambulance after walking about 7 blocks.
What's the most serious problem that you're facing right now?
Serious problem is what to do with the ash, and getting it washed down. We're kind of curious how we're going to get rid of all this stuff.
Scores of trailer trucks, many with perishable cargoes, are stuck here because highways in and out of town have been closed. Ironically, some tourists were caught by the volcanic fallout.
We just came here to get a vacation and get some fresh air, but we came here at the wrong time.
Get some fresh air?
Yeah, and then look what happens. It's worse than L.A.
The volcanic ash has stopped falling now, and the cleanup is underway. But officials here say it will be a year or two before this city completely recovers. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Missoula, Montana.
As the ash cloud continued moving east today, it left a sooty trail hundreds of miles wide. The fallout caused the kind of traffic problems for the Pacific Northwest usually associated with blizzards. And as Nelson Benton found out, what began happening last Sunday may have its effect on everything from sunsets to snowfall.
Brilliant sunsets like this one in Nebraska may be the most obvious sign of the ash cloud's movement eastward. Government officials have detected no significant health hazard from the ash east of Montana, the Environmental Protection Agency says. Except for the area within 500 miles of the mountain, agriculture experts were not alarmed.
It just depends on the area, the type of crop, but we're not anticipating a real large amount of damage.
The Weather Service placed the leading edge of the cloud over the Ohio Valley this morning at an altitude of higher than 60,000 feet. It should be above the middle Atlantic states late in the evening, moving on past the east coast sometime tomorrow morning. Volcanic ash in the stratosphere can cause long-term cooling in the weather, but not this time.
The basic effect of the dust, once it has a chance to spread around the world, which takes a few weeks, the dust will act sort of like a parasol, a temperature cooling effect of just a few tenths of 1 degree Fahrenheit. That's all it'll be. And that's really not enough to get very excited about. It might mean that in the east somewhere, sometime next winter, we'll get one extra snowfall where we might have had a rainstorm instead.
Except for those who live fairly near Mount St. Helens, the effects apparently will be small, unless the eruptions intensify. Nelson Benton, CBS News, Washington.
Good evening. 3 days after the eruption of Mount St. Helens in southwest Washington state, imponderables dust the air like volcanic ash. 10 persons are known dead, 71 are missing, and one estimate is that it will take more than $150 million just for road and bridge repair. It is an event that defies superlatives. One geologist said today, there is no record in geology in the last 4,000 years of anything like this happening before. The tremendous lateral blast is unprecedented. And for one photographer, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Gary Shepard reports on these remarkable pictures.
Gary Lee Rosenquist had camped out overnight at Bear Meadow, 8 miles northeast of Mount St. Helens. 27 years old and unemployed, he was hoping to get some good pictures of the mountain to help launch a career in photography. He got off to a good start. This sequence of photos was taken during the first 60 seconds of the mountain's eruption, beginning shortly after 8:30 on Sunday morning. Rosenquist and 4 friends barely made it out, jumping into their car and driving as fast as they could with volcanic ash and gases, as well as rocks and mud moving up rapidly behind them. They escaped with their lives, and with these spectacular photos of the mountain's worst eruption in more than 30,000 years. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Seattle.
President Carter left the White House today to fly to the Pacific Northwest, where he'll look at the damage caused by Mount St. Helens. Before leaving for Portland, the president declared Washington state a major disaster area, releasing federal relief funds. Officials say the eruption already has spewed almost as much rock and ash as Vesuvius dumped on ancient Pompeii. The White House also announced today the president will visit Miami later at an undisclosed date to assess the damage in that city's racial explosion. Weather makes it problematical how much Mr. Carter will see at Mount St. Helens. Terry Drinkwater has that story.
At the command posts, it was a frustrating day. Rescue helicopters couldn't fly because Mount St. Helens was shrouded in dense rain clouds. Scores are still stranded below the volcano, safe but anxious to be airlifted out. The rain and the runoff from the melting snow on the hot mountain is now bringing some rivers towards flood stage again. But geologists today were forecasting a quiet period ahead for the mountain.
We're hopeful at this point that the stresses that have been building up have been released and that we're at least in for a period of regrouping without any particular danger at the moment.
Last Sunday, when it blew, 2 other geologists were flying directly above what is now the crater and saw it all. Keith and Dorothy Stoffel.
The whole top of the north side just began to ripple and kind of churn up, and everything to the north of that just slid away, just completely slid away. And within seconds after that, a huge blast occurred.
The clouds, as they rose, what happened?
They were billowing up almost like in big pillow sort of structures. And at that point, of course, I was terrified personally, and we weren't sure that we were going to make it out of that situation at all.
To the east, in Yakima, Washington, residents weren't sure until today how they were going to get out of their situation. Volcanic ash everywhere. But tonight, the mountain is just spewing steam. The worst of the ash problem may at last be over. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Portland.
The Agriculture Department says it's too early to tell about the damage Mount St. Helens will do to crops and livestock, but just about any place in the area, life has changed dramatically since Sunday. For example, look at Ritzville, Washington, with Harold Dow.
Words just can't describe Ritzville, Washington. 3 days after Mount St. Helens blew her top, smothering this central Washington community under 5 inches of volcanic ash. It looks like the aftermath of a brutal winter storm. But it's mid-May, and the dust is much harder to remove than snow. Graders, snowplows were all pressed into service. Despite their unusual dilemma, residents manning shovels and brooms seem to be in good spirits.
Haven't seen anything like it ever.
I don't know. I tell you, I never want to see it again.
The volcanic dust storm hit suddenly last Sunday afternoon. 1 minute it was sunny and bright. The next minute it looked like night. Ash falling everywhere.
Well, the community did a great job. We had about 2,000 people stranded. They took them in their home, their churches, the schools full. We fed them good, no problem with food and medicine.
And some of those who were stranded here feel the same way. They couldn't wait to leave.
Incredible. I couldn't believe it. It was scary. You know, you couldn't see in front of you, and you started breathing the stuff, and of course had no idea whether or not it was poison or harmful.
In this convoy are some of the 2,000 people who have been stranded here since Sunday. Law enforcement officials have decided it is safe for groups of travelers to go. Everyone is leaving Ritzville in a cloud of dust. Harold Dow, CBS News, Ritzville, Washington.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. President Carter flew by helicopter today to assess the damage caused by Sunday's eruption of Mount St. Helens. Scientists now suggest that explosion may have equaled the power generated by the largest hydrogen bomb ever detonated on Earth. The president said of the devastated landscape, "I don't know of anything else like it in the world." Robert Pierpoint reports.
The president spent about half an hour flying over the worst part of the devastated area, got within 2 miles of Mount St. Helens itself before being forced back by bad weather. Landing at the town of Kelso, Washington, Mr. Carter said the scene he had witnessed was almost indescribable.
I've never seen or heard of anything like this before. Somebody said it looked like a moonscape, but the moon looks like a golf course compared to what's up there. It is a horrible looking sight. The mountains are just completely devastated.
The presidential party then drove across the silt-filled Cowlitz River to Longview, where Mr. Carter talked briefly with some of the families who've been evacuated from the lower-lying areas still threatened by mud and floods. The evacuees are being cared for by Red Cross and local authorities. Back in Portland, President Carter held a press conference where he said the situation around Mount St. Helens is improving.
My belief is, after talking to scientific advisors and others, that there is no major immediate threat to the health or safety of those in this region.
On his way home, President Carter stopped briefly in Spokane near the Washington-Idaho border, where he held still another press conference and announced that he is classifying 8 counties in Idaho federal disaster areas because they're covered with several inches of volcanic ash. On this trip to the west, the president was bringing federal aid and personal encouragement to an area in need of all the support it can get. Fortunately for him, 2 states in this region have primaries in the next few weeks, Idaho and California. So the trip does provide Mr. Carter some political benefit as well. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, Portland.
Geologists who got a closer view of the volcano than the president did, flying right into the crater, called the scene spooky and scary. Other scientists reported new rumblings from the mountain today. They aren't sure what that portends. But there are many mysteries in the ravaged 150 square miles around the volcano. As Terry Drinkwater reports, that includes a death toll that could climb mountain high.
Today, for the first time, as some of the rivers receded, you could see evidence of the incredible force of the steaming mud and ash flows that had smashed through the valleys below Mount St. Helens. Authorities said tonight that the death toll, now 14, could well rise to nearly 100. There are so many still unaccounted for. The wreckage of these homes has not yet even been searched. Those who watched from the high ground said the flow was so fast this community was gone in 5 minutes. Down the Toutle River, the devastation more resembles that of a conventional spring flood, though a disastrous one.
That house right there is the one that just took right off the foundation and turned it right off the foundation.
Dredging the main ship channel started today, but how long it will take to pump all of the silt away, authorities won't even guess. Meanwhile, there were drinking water and sewage problems. Plants clogged with ash. As far away as Yakima, treatment facilities broke down and raw sewage had to be dumped into the river. But the first Amtrak train since the eruption did finally make it across Washington state today, making emergency stops to pick up the stranded. And other good news, the rain in many cities kept the ashes from blowing around. But on Mount St. Helens, government geologists reported new rumblings have been detected. Far above where these pictures were taken, they flew down into the new crater, now nearly a mile deep and horseshoe-shaped. They said molten rock may be moving again beneath the ash. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Portland.
Mount St. Helens in Washington state just about quit rumbling today with a small earthquake fitting what one official called the overall picture of lowered activity that has developed. The search continues for survivors of Sunday's eruption. The search for the dead may never end. Gary Shepard reports.
Military rescue helicopters expanded and intensified their search around Mount St. Helens today in hopes of locating stranded survivors of last Sunday's explosive eruption. But officials of the U.S. Forest Service, which is in charge of the effort, said the chance of anyone still being alive is slim. The bodies of 17 known victims of the eruption are being processed at a temporary field morgue 35 miles from the volcano.
The total missing list we have is 88. We will never recover all the 88, in my opinion.
Why is that?
They're already entombed out there.
This afternoon, observation helicopters were allowed to fly into the area of devastation. Mount St. Helens itself was enveloped in clouds, but it was possible to see the Spirit Lake region just to the north. The steam rising out of the ground is the result, according to geologists, of water seeping into fissures in the earth and vaporizing when it hits hot rock. The water temperature in the lake itself has been measured at 92 degrees. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Toledo, Washington.
Those close to the mountain who survived still live in fear. They are camping in small groups as near as 10 miles from the base of Mount St. Helens, to be close to what is left of their homes or just to be safe on the high ground in case of more floods or mud and ash flows. They are rugged people, quite self-sufficient, save for some food the Salvation Army brings. On the hilltop, in tents, they have made their own semi-permanent community.
Yesterday, the seismic activity, which some geologists say could mean the movement of molten rock deep within the peak.
One radio station does nothing but broadcast the latest on the volcano. Today's news was encouraging enough for the Deckerts in their 80s to chance a drive home to pick up more supplies. It is trite to say this, Nadine Axelson told us, but life does go on. Life began for Michelle Deckert the day Mount St. Helens blew. Hers is one birthday no one here will ever forget. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, near Toutle, Washington.
The after effects of the Mount St. Helens eruption apparently will outlast the aftershocks. The Department of Transportation expects volcanic ash to blow around northwest highways throughout the summer. Right now, says the department, some 26,000 miles of highway in Washington state are considered impassable. Officials said some small airports in Washington and Idaho will remain closed into next week because of ash deposits on the runways. More than 100,000 tons of ash were removed before the Spokane airport could reopen Wednesday.
There's another minor eruption of the Mount St. Helens volcano today. Smoke and ash rising 2,000 feet into the sky, but the general situation appears to have stabilized. There are at least 18 known dead from the eruption, and damage estimates climb today beyond the $1.6 billion mark. 4 of the known dead were members of the same family, and Harold Dow has their story.
For most, the story of Mount St. Helens began last Sunday with violent eruptions and tragic devastation. But for one Olympia, Washington family, the story goes back much further than that. It was the beauty of Mount St. Helens that lured the Seibold family to it again and again. But last Sunday, the mountain they loved so much brought death to Barbara Seibold, her husband Ron, and their 2 children, 9-year-old Michelle and 7-year-old Kevin. Barbara's brother Bill told of their love affair with Mount St. Helens.
Well, it was their mountain, and they went down there any chance they could get, and it was popular to them even before the volcano happened. So it was their mountain. They loved to go down there.
They were an outdoor family, intrigued with nature and its many wonders. These are pictures taken on one of their many trips to the mountain. Close friend Elise Harrington went with the Seibolds on a Mother's Day trip.
Ron used to climb that mountain, and I don't know exactly how many times he climbed it, but then he got Barbara and the kids interested in it, and they like to go hiking up there. And lately they had been going back and forth so they could see how the volcano was changing, how the mountain was changing, and they just took lots of pictures. He thought we had, that it was safe, that there would be no problems. We had plenty of time to get out.
But there wasn't enough time. The eruption was so sudden. The Seibolds were trapped. Rescue helicopters sighted their bodies in their car on Sunday, but had to move on in search of survivors. The next day, another eruption. The car is now buried under 100 feet of mud and ash.
I think that if they had picked a place to go, that they were probably in the best place, that they would be happy being there. And that was their home away from home, and that would have been their choosing to have been there.
Yesterday, a memorial service for the Seibold family. So many friends and relatives attending, some had to stand outside.
When he was taken from us, he was in his favorite place, doing his favorite thing, with his favorite people. I can't think of a more appropriate way for Ron to go than that.
Harold Dow, CBS News, Tumwater, Washington.
This is the CBS Sunday Night News with Ed Bradley.
Good evening. In Washington state, Mount St. Helens volcano erupted again today, sending ash 9 miles high. It was the strongest eruption since last Sunday's explosion, which left at least 18 dead and more than 70 missing. Today, there were no reported casualties, but many serious problems. We have a report from Gary Shepard.
This is what today's eruption looked like from above the clouds. Volcanic ash and gases rising as high as 45,000 feet, accompanied by earth tremors that lasted for much of the day. The rain mixed with the ash and coated the landscape over a wide area in Washington and Oregon, prompting the owners of this private campground 14 miles south of Mount St. Helens to evacuate 800 campers who had planned to spend the long holiday weekend. Getting out wasn't easy.
Windshield's plowed up. You can't keep the stuff off the windshield. I've got a little bit of stuff left here to keep it clean, but I'm just hoping we can get down. It's very difficult to see out.
The cloud of ash moved as far south as Portland, Oregon, the largest city affected by the volcano so far, and the speed limit was reduced to 15 miles an hour to keep the dust down. The city's major airport was closed to both incoming and outgoing traffic. This eruption was not as serious as last Sunday's. Geologists gave it a 3 against a 10 for last week, and they said it's probably better that way.
We may be darn lucky if we have the volcano clearing its throat once in a while. A lot of little things rather than building up to the point where we get another great big blast.
There was some encouraging news. Officials said the ash fallout does not appear to be causing as many respiratory problems as first feared. and damage to the substantial agricultural industry in this region is not as serious as was expected. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Portland, Oregon.
Scientists say those earthquakes are not related to the eruption of Mount St. Helens in southwest Washington state. The death toll there stands at 21. Officials lowered the number of missing to 68, but searchers warn that each passing day dims the chance of finding survivors. Bernard Goldberg reports.
What is becoming an increasingly desperate search for survivors resumed full scale for the first time since Saturday today. Most aircraft had been grounded because of the thick fallout of volcanic ash that hampered visibility and threatened to wreck aircraft engines. But even as the search resumed, officials were saying the chances of finding anyone alive are slim. And even though there was no significant fallout today, tons of volcanic ash that have already fallen over a wide area of the Pacific Northwest continue to hamper driving. Throughout the region, people who work outdoors are still wearing masks, fearing that inhalation of the ash could cause respiratory problems. Meanwhile, Mount St. Helens was still shrouded by a cover of thick clouds. Late today, it began rumbling, briefly, then quieted down again, giving no clue as to what might come next. Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, Portland.
Incidentally, 5 members of a documentary film crew who had been reported missing were rescued by helicopter about 8 miles north of the volcano. Specialists from the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation today began surveying agricultural damage caused by the volcano. The Carter administration will present to Congress tomorrow its first estimate of the volcano's cost to the federal government. And as Gary Shepard reports, that economic fallout already is past the $1 billion mark and still climbing.
The eruption of Mount St. Helens a week ago Sunday not only unleashed the destructive power some scientists say was equivalent to the hydrogen bomb, it also left a legacy of economic losses in the state of Washington that are staggering and continuing to grow. The U.S. Forest Service, for example, estimates timber losses alone inside the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest at $250 million. Private timber outside federal land, $150 million in losses. A preliminary estimate of the cost of rebuilding highways and bridges torn out by violent mudslides, $40 million. The Army Corps of Engineers figures it will cost $32 million just to dredge the mud out of the Columbia River. Because shipping has been disrupted, the ports of Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Oregon figure they're losing $5 million a day in revenues. Agricultural losses are expected to run as high as $250 million, and a similar figure is given for unemployment benefits to people thrown out of work by the disaster. 37,000 workers, many of them loggers, are expected to be out of a job for up to a year. Still to be determined are losses to private property, not only in the vicinity of the volcano, but even hundreds of miles away, homes and cars damaged by volcanic ash fallout. Those losses expected to run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Losses in other states like Idaho, Montana, and Oregon will be substantially less, and no firm estimates are yet available.
I suspect from an economic standpoint it will be one of the big disasters. I'm not prepared to say it'll be the biggest or the third biggest, but certainly it'll be among the half dozen or so big major disasters in recent times.
So far, the overall economic cost of the Mount St. Helens disaster is approaching the $2 billion mark, but that figure is certain to go higher still if there are new major eruptions. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Portland, Oregon.
Now, government scientists predicted today that the gigantic ash cloud formed from Mount St. Helens eruption May 18th will probably reach the United States again early next week after traveling around the world. He said the cloud is at about 20,000 feet and should be fairly dispersed when it returns. With 71 persons still missing 11 days after Mount St. Helens exploded, the volcano remains a threat and a mystery. Scientists examined photographs of its interior today, but like doctors disputing an X-ray, they disagreed on what the pictures indicate for the future. Gary Shepard reports.
For the first time in more than a week, the tip of Mount St. Helens appeared above the clouds today, and no smoke or ash could be seen emerging from it. This is what the crater looked like 2 days after the big eruption, as seen by airborne radar, looking almost directly down from 22,000 feet. Notice the dark center. This is what the crater looked like last night, Professor Chuck Rosenfeld, a geologist from Oregon State University who has analyzed these photos, believes the light-colored area inside the crater represents the formation of a dome, a crusting that could mean a substantial lessening of ash eruptions. That would be good news for the millions of people around here who've been suffering from ash fallout in recent days. U.S. Geological Survey scientists who have seen the same photos don't think the dome formation has begun.
I think this explosive phase, we're looking forward to a period of weeks, possibly months, but more probably weeks.
There were 2 earthquakes only a few miles from Mount St. Helens today, measuring nearly 4 on the Richter scale. But scientists said they were not sure whether that means another major eruption is about to begin. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Portland.
Clearing skies gave scientists a rare look at Mount St. Helens in Washington State today. The volcano has been shrouded by clouds most of the time since the May 18th eruption that now has claimed 22 lives. To geologists, it remains a puzzle, but one that promises some answers for the future. Harold Dow reports.
Every morning for more than a week now, teams of geologists, armed with their seismic tools, have been boarding helicopters in Vancouver, Washington, and flying as far up on Mount St. Helens as weather will allow. They land on the rocky slopes, still off limits to everyone else, to collect samples, to take temperatures, and try to assess the mood of the mountain. According to officials from the U.S. Geological Survey, the eruption was the best monitored and best documented ever. The volcano will become a natural laboratory for scientists and geologists for years and years to come. The size of the May 18th explosion surprised the experts, and geologists like Tim Haight are quick to admit that science is still in its infancy in understanding volcanoes. And he was amazed at the magnitude of the destruction.
This area must resemble the desolation of the moon. It must have been an absolute muddy slurry when it came into this position.
CBS News accompanied Haight, a member of the U.S. Geological Survey, on his first trip into the devastated area. He was clearly awed by the sights.
On a small scale, this must be very close to what the big eruption of the 18th looked like. The water in this material goes down, comes in contact with the hot rocks, explodes into steam. Look at the way those clouds are coming out at the bottom. Fantastic.
Haight and his cohorts say what they're discovering here at Mount St. Helens will contribute enormously to the understanding of volcanoes, but their ultimate goal remains out of grasp.
It's hard to say how much there is to learn before we'll get to the point where we can predict terrible disasters, events like this.
Officials hope to get another overview of the mountain later today from the SR-71 spy plane sent from California. It's hoped its sophisticated cameras will help locate some of the 58 persons still missing near Mount St. Helens. Harold Dow, CBS News, Vancouver, Washington.
There always seems to be someone ready to make a buck out of even a disaster. Bernard Goldberg tells us of some Mount St. Helens entrepreneurs.
Calvin Coolidge was right. He wasn't talking about Mount St. Helens when he said the business of America is business, but he might as well have been. Because in addition to the eruption on the mountain, there has been another eruption, a volcano mania business boom. There is the Mount St. Helens ashtray.
What you do is you put a cigarette in here, and it smokes at the top.
And of course, there's the handy pocket-sized version of Mount St. Helens.
And by putting a little soda in here and some vinegar, smoke will come up and we have a Mount St. Helens eruption.
So you have your own little volcano at home.
Yeah. And a toy for a kid. A kid can be playing with that for years.
That's a cute little item. And what would a volcano eruption be without volcano t-shirts? And volcano buttons? And the ever-popular volcano frisbee. $2.99, thank you. And for anyone who couldn't experience the volcanic ash fallout firsthand, they're selling vials of real ash. But if that's too vile for you, you can buy the real ash and the real story of Mount St. Helens on a card.
Yep, and people want to mail it. You know, they want to tell a story to their friends, Aunt Molly in San Diego or Chicago, wherever she lives. Here, this is the actual ash that come from Mount St. Helens.
And he, of course, is Captain Volcano, who for a couple of bucks will sell you a Captain Volcano outfit for your very own. For months, the scientists thought the only fallout from Mount St. Helens was the ash. That is, until the business community found out just how much cash was in that ash. Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, Portland.
A coroner now is beginning to issue so-called presumptive death certificates for the 55 persons still missing after the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Some of the dead were drawn to the mountain by its terrible beauty. That seemed lost in the wake of the explosion, but today Mount St. Helens exerts a different kind of fascination. Harold Dow reports.
It took 12 days, but the Lady of the Cascades, Mount St. Helens, finally removed her veil today. Clouds vanished from around her peak for the first time since the awesome May 18th eruption, which blew the top 1,300 feet right off the mountain. Perhaps it is because St. Helens can seem so serene that so many refuse to heed the warnings about a possible eruption, and so much life was lost. The whole north side of the volcano was blown away in what scientists call a lateral blast, an explosion so powerful it left this horseshoe crater, a mile from rim to rim, 3,000 feet deep. Geologists calculate that nearly a cubic mile of the mountain was obliterated, leaving this spectacular gap on the top and miles of devastation down below. Experts from the U.S. Geological Survey said today there are now strong indications that a lava dome may finally have begun to form at the bottom of the crater. Residents around the volcano hope that signals a return to dormancy. But scientists also know that sometimes such dome formation is followed by more lateral eruptions, which might again spatter the surrounding countryside with rocks and ash. There's no denying the fascination in what nature has done here. Mount St. Helens has turned into a natural laboratory where scientists will come again and again, attempting to put the puzzle together, trying to better understand what really happened here. Harold Dow, CBS News, Portland.
This is the CBS Evening News, with Morton Dean substituting for Bob Schieffer.
Good evening. Mount St. Helens is continuing its geological sideshow. Now the experts say the volcano could be growing a new mountain inside the crater of the mountaintop it destroyed. David Dow reports.
CBS News camera crews flew literally inside the giant crater of Mount St. Helens today and found a moonscape still spurting billows of smoke and steam. Beneath the turbulent clouds, federal scientists say that St. Helens may be sprouting a mountain within a mountain, still not perceptible to airborne observers. But instruments, they say, indicate that a dome of crusted lava continues to grow on the floor of the crater. Within the dome, sludgy lava pulsates up and down, pressing the crust upward until one day it could reach an altitude of 1,000 feet. A federal geologist said today he could probably rule out any more major eruptions such as those of the past 2 Sundays, but he still expects intermittent spurts of steam and ash from the volcano itself and the Spirit Lake region to the north for a long time to come. Mount St. Helens is still a very dangerous place, he concluded. It's a danger that prompted evacuation of 100 residents from the Swift Creek Reservoir area about 10 miles south of the crater right after the first eruption. But one man, Ray Jennings, a 74-year-old ex-merchant seaman, refused to leave until yesterday, remaining in a cabin with 4 dogs, going fishing sometimes, while bridges were snapped by torrents of logs.
There's trees come down there 100 feet in the air, and there's so many logs in that river that it held them trees upright.
Now, the authorities came in and tried to talk you into coming out. Evidently, they thought there was a danger in your being there.
Yeah, I know.
Your relatives say there was a danger.
Oh, well, what the hell? I wasn't afraid of it.
Why not?
Well, why should I? Because it already blew its cork, and it ain't going to blow twice in the same day or same week either.
What made you finally decide to go along with your rescuers and come out of there?
When 3 or 4 Army guys come out and Deputy Sheriff come out, it's about time to leave, I guess.
Jennings says he can't wait to return to his cabin. David Dow, CBS News, Portland.
Ray Jennings is a lucky man. He lived to tell the tale that 35 others and possibly dozens more did not. Gary Shepard reports on the search for the victims of Mount St. Helens.
It has been underway since the day the mountain exploded, the grim task of searching for those caught inside the zone of devastation. It has been an exhausting effort.
There was the one truck where the one subject was still watching the volcano, and they took the victim out. There was 2 pickups parked right next to it that have never been confirmed yet, and Toledo was supposed to get a location for us where they're at because they've got the new ash cover on them.
This mission is to check out Spud Mountain, only 7 miles from the volcano, where at least 2 vehicles had been spotted from the air. The landscape is covered with a heavy volcanic ash that almost looks like a snowfall. This is not the fine talcum powder ash that was blown hundreds of miles from here by the winds. This stuff is more like coarse sand. The dogs are turned loose. Searchers who've been working from dawn to dusk hope they will locate the scent of a victim so the body can be recovered. There is no sign of life near this camper vehicle, which apparently took a direct hit when Mount St. Helens erupted.
Looks like a rig got blown over, blown apart, and burned up.
Any evidence of any people?
There's a dog up there, probably 30 yards above the truck.
But no evidence of the owner?
No. Haven't found anything yet.
The remains of a dog are spotted up the hill from the camper, and searchers theorize it wouldn't have been out here alone, so there must be at least one adult buried here somewhere, and perhaps even a child. A toy pistol is spotted among the debris only a few feet from the vehicle. But a painstaking search fails to turn up any leads. Higher up the hill, another vehicle is spotted, a car with all its windows blown out, the keys still in the ignition, but no sign of life, just an eerie stillness. There is hardly any noise at all up here on Spud Mountain. Authorities will attempt to identify the owner by checking the license plates. Not far away, one searcher finds what's left of a parka, but nothing more.
The search for the bodies of those still listed as missing is expected to continue at least through the weekend, but after that it is likely to be called off. Officials here admit many of the victims will never be recovered. They already lie in their final resting place. Gary Shepard, CBS News, near Mount St. Helens.
With the air search for survivors officially ended, the toll in the eruption of Mount St. Helens stood at 22 confirmed dead today, with 51 persons still missing. Scientists now say that what appeared to be a lava dome forming in the crater does not seem to be developing. They concede they don't know what the volcano will do next, but some area residents are returning to home and workplace. And David Dow reports.
When Mount St. Helens erupted and unleashed its avalanche, Camp Baker was the first and hardest hit of the Weyerhaeuser lumber camps in the valley below it. Had it not been Sunday, a day off, the human tragedy could have been awesome. But already crews are back, trying to salvage from the sea of mud whatever they can. They monitor radios for any sign that St. Helens, just 10 miles away, could be restless again. Some admit they're nervous about their work, but stoic.
Put it to you this way, I never worry about anything I can't control, and nobody's going to control that hill, so whatever happens, happens. If the good Lord wants somebody up there now, then we'll get it. If he don't, we won't.
Today, the powers that control St. Helens continued spewing steam from the yawning crater on her north side. Geologists said there were no hints of another eruption. Around Spirit Lake, now a swampy mudflat on the mountain skirts, new fumaroles, geysers of escaping steam, continued spurting. No cause for alarm, say geologists, and with a new blanket of snow, St. Helens looked serenely unlike the mountain that exploded just 15 days ago. David Dow, CBS News, Spirit Lake, Washington.
And that's the way it is. Monday, June 2nd, 1980, the 212th day of captivity for the American hostages in Iran. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.